My dream saved my life but killed my family. I served 26 years in prison. June 17, 1997 at 5:46 a.m. was the worst day of my entire life. My name is Alex Torland. I was in prison for 26 years for having a simple dream that saved my life, but it didn't save my family's life. June 17, 1997 at 5:38 a.m., I woke up from a dream and started screaming. I remember every detail of the dream, including where I was, where my brother and sister was, and even our pet dog Yogi.
I rushed out of bed and started banging on the doors of my mom and dad and my siblings' rooms. They came out worried about what was going on. I was frantic and couldn't get a single word out. Finally, after 2 minutes, I screamed, "We need to leave right now." They all looked at me like I was insane. I started pleading for them to believe me, but they didn't. It just hit 5:42 a.m. and I knew we only had 4 minutes left.
You would think that would be plenty of time, but for trying to explain that everyone was gonna die, it's definitely not enough time. A single tear flowed down my cheek and I knew at that very second, my family was gonna die. My siblings went back into their rooms and my parents were just shaking their heads. I can't even blame them either. I've always had a wild imagination. I also had a history of lying. It's all my fault. I'm so sorry, I said. I had 1 minute and ran as fast as I could to the front door, knowing the seconds were ticking down. I ran across the street screaming for help. It was like slow motion. I looked up at the right window and saw my older sister with a confused look, and then, it was gone. I woke up probably like a minute later on the ground, my ears ringing, looked up and my entire house was in flames and gone. It took exactly 7 minutes and 24 seconds for the police, fire trucks, and the ambulances to show up. I tried running up to the house, but I was stopped by the police before I could. I turned around and punched the officer in the face that was trying to stop me. I started running again and I was tackled and handcuffed before I could. I started screaming for my mom and dad, but my screaming fell on deaf ears. They put out the fire and the only thing left remaining was the ashes of my home and my family. I was taken down to the police station for questioning about the events that took place. As soon as I sat down in the interrogation room, I didn't cry or scream. I just sat there in shock, wondering if I was still dreaming. I looked down at my arm and pinched myself. The moment I felt the pinch was the moment I felt my whole world crash down onto me. The lead detective came in as I had my head down and I was crying. He brought me a coffee and a sandwich. I guess this was his way to be the nice cop. Only if I knew about having rights, or even for the fact I was the main suspect for an unforgivable crime I didn't commit. "So Mr. Torland, is it okay if I call you Alex or should I call you Alexander?" he said. My eyes were empty, my body felt of just pure emptiness, and I didn't even respond. "Look, we need to talk about what happened tonight, because right now you're being charged with an assault on a police officer and 4 first-degree murder charges," he said. This is when I looked up for the first time and I was back in my body. I took the coffee and threw it onto him, burning his face, and 3 officers ran in and pinned me down and put me in handcuffs. I started screaming for my mom, which is something I haven't done since I was 6. I was 15 at the time. I'm now 43 years old and I remember that scream like it was yesterday. I was taken to a jail cell and left there for 3 days. I was called every name in the book by the guards. I could hear the radio in the other room and was being called a monster for something I didn't do. Finally they took me out of the jail cell and into the interrogation room again. A different officer walked in. "Hey Alex, I'm Detective Lennon. Let me go ahead and read you your rights before we start talking," he says. There was only one thing on my mind and I finally spoke up. "Are they dead?" I said as I'm still looking down at the metal table as I can my reflection. "Unfortunately yes, your entire family is deceased," he says. He reads me my rights. "So, at this time, you're being charged with both assaults on the police officers and for the 4 homicides. That's including your mother Patricia, your father Paul, your sister Lucy, and your brother Eric. Do you understand what I'm telling you?" I looked up at him. "I didn't kill them," I said, and then put my head back down. He looked at me and said straight to my face, "Look, we both know you killed your family, and we both know that you're just gonna have to accept this reality. There was an explosive device found in the basement and you're the only one that's still alive. The sooner you come to terms with that, the sooner we can get this difficult part over with. Your family is dead. You happened to run out of your house exactly 1 minute before the bomb went off. Now how did you know the bomb was gonna go off if you didn't have any part in this?" I looked up at him with tears rolling down my cheeks. "I dreamt it," I said as I was staring straight into his eyes. "Look, Alex, we know you did this, we just don't know why. It looks like you've had a really good life and an amazing family. Why would you kill them? You're so young and had a bright future ahead of you and you killed your family," he said. I looked up at him again. "Go fuck yourself," I said to him. I looked back down again at the prison attire I had on. The officer got up and walked out of the room. 5 minutes later, a couple of officers came in and put me in cuffs and brought me back to my cell. A few weeks later, I had my future trial. I walked into the courtroom and there were a bunch of people. There was police officers, my other family members, the media. There had to be at least 14 cameras in there. I sat down and my attorney sat down right next to me and he whispered in my ear, "Welcome to the show, kid. Look, we're gonna make this as easy as possible and you're gonna plead guilty and try to get you life in prison instead of the death penalty." I looked over at him. "I didn't do this. I'm innocent." He looked over at me again with a surprised look and chuckled. "Yes," he actually laughed in my face, "a 15-year-old kid. If I had a nickel for every time I've heard that line, look, I'm trying to help you here. If you plead guilty, then you will most likely get life instead of the death penalty." The judge walked in and we all stood up. We were told to be seated. I sat down as I saw everyone staring at me. I started shaking as I knew the whole world was against me. I could feel every part of my body just losing its blood flow, like my heart was about to stop. The trial went on for 2 years. Let's just say that each time I walked into the courtroom was another time I had to relive my family's death. Each one of my tears were seen as he's sorry he got caught, not that his family is dead. I was fucking 15 years old, barely had any hair on my bills. I didn't get to live my life and neither did my family. After 2 years of the trial going on, it was finally time for them to sentence me. I was sentenced to 4 consecutive life sentences. They dropped the charges for the assault on the police officers. When the judge read off the sentence, I basically dropped to the ground. I screamed I didn't do this, but not a single person listened to me. It took 26 years for them to finally list. Luckily, with how good science has gotten since the 90s, they could finally look at the DNA left at the scene. I was in prison for 26 years for a crime that I didn't commit. If it wasn't for the dream I had 26 years earlier, I would be dead too. They found fingerprints to a man named Brandon Torland. If you've noticed the similarities to the last names, he's my uncle. We have a very small and close family except for my uncle Brandon. 27 years earlier, my uncle Brandon was cut off from the family and the trust fund that was going to be left from my grandparents. My grandfather was a very wealthy man. He owned several different businesses he created and later sold. My uncle Brandon was the type of person to be the so-called life of the party type. He eventually was addicted to heroin and cocaine and would do anything to get his fix. He wanted to get the inheritance so the party would never end, even if that meant that his nephew would go to prison for life. He also didn't care that he was killing 4 of his family members, including his nephew and niece and his brother and sister-in-law. You would think that it's a good thing I was finally released and the man who actually killed my family was behind bars. Some people would call that making things right. It's not about me being free and the scumbag that killed my family is behind bars. My life will forever be ruined even though my name has been cleared. I was eventually rewarded $17 million for being wrongfully convicted for a crime I didn't commit. I will be donating the $17 million to several different charities, including to people who were wrongfully accused. I wanted to quickly tell my story before it's time for me to see my family again. I just want to say a huge thank you to Brian Luther, who I met in prison, for protecting me through the years and having my back. I will see you soon, Mom, Dad, Eric, and Lucy. R.I.P. Alex Torland, born August 26, 1982 and died November 5, 2024. He was found dead from a self-inflicted